first thing that I need to do here is to try and get this clay in the center of the wheel. And the name of this game that we're doing here is keeping the clay in the center of the wheel. The wheel being this circle right here. So everything is pivoting around the center point, center axis of this circle, okay? So I want to throw this clay down hard enough that I can put pressure on it and it's not going to fly off the wheel. So this isn't really hard enough, okay? I'm going to end up pushing on it and just push it off. It's okay if you throw it down and it's not in the right spot. It's flat now, so you want to smack it a couple more times and get it round again. Say you throw it down and it's pretty close to the center of the wheel. Don't just start. I'm going to show you. This is what, again, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be kind of like bouncing everywhere. Before you start, just push it closer, okay? To get it into the center, one trick is to put it here, keep your elbow on your leg as a hinge, and just pick up and push it back down, okay? That's the easiest way. The whole time you're doing this, you're going to be as close to the wheel as you can be. So I'm all the way up, my body's touching it. Okay, and you're gonna be keeping your elbows on your legs or on your hips the whole time. As much as possible, especially at first. So, throwing it down. I like just like I was doing in my hand earlier, just hitting it and pushing. I'm just making it easier for myself. Because the first step is to get this centered. Does anyone know what centered is? What that refers to?
I assume in the middle.
Yeah, it means in the middle, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You want the clay in the middle. But what we want is an even amount of material distributed around the center point of this circle. So if it's this shape, again, it's just more work for me to do in a minute. So while the wheel's off, I just get it close, and then I just have less work to do in a second. So I'm already close here. We're trying to avoid friction the whole time. So I don't need to put so much water that you're splashing your neighbor, but what you want to do is avoid friction. So I'm getting my hands a little bit wet, a little bit of water on here. And I'm just going to tap this and speed it up. Okay. The fastest you will ever have the wheel going is during this stage. And I wouldn't really recommend faster than this. This is generally faster than I'm throwing it. So a little more water. Is anyone here left-handed? You're left-handed. Okay. So everything I'm saying, just the inverse hand. Unless you want to try throwing right-handed. Remember that we need to spin the wheels the opposite direction. They need to go clockwise or then counterclockwise. Yeah. So this, with my left hand, I'm going to open it up. I've practiced this a lot, so my hand's almost like a 90-degree angle here, though. Some of that takes a little bit of practice. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to tuck my elbow into my hip. So I'm not over here, right? I'm like all the way back as much as possible. And now, because it's in my hip, I can actually just lean forward with my body to put pressure. And now I don't have to rely on my shoulder. So you don't really ever want to be doing this. It's all shoulder muscle. When you're here, you can just lean back and forth. So my left hand is this way, pushing across the clay, and you can see it makes it taller. Right? My right hand is on top of the clay, my elbow down, so you're making these tiny arms like this, and I'm pushing down. So by changing the pressure, left hand more right now, I can make it taller. More pressure with my right hand. Right, I can make it shorter. So what the clay's doing here is it's taking the negative space of my hand. This shape that I'm making in here is the shape that the clay takes. So if my pinky is wrapped around, somewhere, it's going to take that shape, okay? And it's okay if it's knocked off. The whole time you're going to be kind of centering and recentering. So right now it's close, but everyone sees it's like dancing around a little bit. We want to get it to where it's not moving at all, which means I need a little bit more pressure. Left hand and right hand. Now really this is a little bit fast for me. So I'm going to slow that back down. I'm just cleaning the wheel off so that I can actually see what's going on. It's close to being centered. but it's not all the way centered, right? Does everyone see it's moving a little bit? So if you hold your finger really still, it should be touching the whole time. And right now, it's not. It's just touching that one spot. The reality is, and I'm not going to talk too much more about this other than say it's a possibility, is that part of it can be centered while part of it is off-centered. Okay, so that's something to watch out for. As you do this more, my goal for you is to be able to identify that and then make those adjustments in your hand. So I can adjust where I'm putting pressure, right, to bring it into center. So first step is getting it centered, and the shape that you want is something wider than it is tall, like a hockey puck proportion. This is gonna make it way, way easier to make your ball. Next step is called opening it up. So what you're gonna do is go right down in the middle. You don't really need to draw that spiral. I'm just doing that to show you. It's much easier to go down right in the middle than you think. You kind of naturally find it. So I use 2 fingers. I'm gonna hold my wrist like my hand's a tool. I'm gonna tuck both my elbows down again. I'm always bracing because I want my body to be as still as possible. And it's much easier to be still if I'm using multiple parts of my body than this. This is way harder, okay? And I'm gonna start pushing straight down. Notice that I'm not doing this, I'm not coming in at an angle, coming straight down. And just like the pinch pot, I'm gonna stop before I go all the way through. I wanna leave room to carve that clay out later when I flip it over. So I've just gone down a little bit. Sometimes you go down in the middle, let's see if I can do this, and it's off and it looks like this. That's okay. Just don't keep going, just fix it before you keep going. So I put my hands here, thumbs on the inside, and I pull towards my palms. And if you sit still again, the clay will go back to sitting still, okay? So a big part of this is just recognizing when something's off, stopping, fixing it before moving on to the next thing. Okay, so I went straight down. Now I'm going to come up and back at the same time. Same body position, holding my wrist, elbows down, up and back. Get the water out. So I'm already really close to having a bowl, right? This is a bowl shape. I just have to fix change the outside shape. But theoretically, I could also trim all of this away and have a bowl. So the really unique thing, one of the unique things about bowls is because you're going to be trimming clay away later, you're not so concerned what the outside shape looks like right now. You're concerned with what the inside shape looks like. Because if you remember back to our pinch pots, the number 1 rule is that things need to be even. So when you trim it and you trim it even, you'll be following the silhouette of the interior. So whatever the inside shape looks like is what the outside shape will become. So it's centered and opened up. Now we have to do the throwing part, what everyone's seen, the pinching and moving. So to do that, lock your thumbs in place, elbows down, your left hand's on the inside, right hand's on the outside. And you're only touching the clay at what is that, 3 o'clock, or right where your right knee's at. You're trying to avoid doing this or this, which is probably gonna happen some. If you're doing this and you feel the clay grab your hands and move it here, it means you need more water, right? We're avoiding that friction. I'm gonna slow the wheel down for this part a little bit. Okay, so my hand's on the inside, and I'm not pushing down because I don't want to go any deeper. I'm actually moving out with my left hand, and then I'm pushing in with my right hand, right here, and moving my hands up together, and stopping before I go over the top, just like that. Now my hand was a little dry, and that's why I got all this clay off. And I don't really love that that's happening, but it's not the end of the world. Just finish what's called the pull. So this is a pull. It's really important not to come up and over the top. Something like that might happen. But again, if it happens, you can fix it. And you can fix it through compression. So what I'm doing right now is using the webbing between my fingers. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. It got a little further out of control, but so I'm gonna fix that really quick. And then we can use this to compress the rim and get a nicer round rim, okay? So we can fix almost anything as you're throwing. The one thing that's really hard to fix is if it gets too wide and it starts to fall. It's really hard to come back from that, okay? So even though it might not look like a bowl initially, I'm really throwing more vertically and not wide. If I'm going to make it wide, it's the very last thing that I do. I got kind of a weird bump in there at some point, but that's okay. It would be really great if everyone's bowls were about 1/4 of an inch thick, all the way around in the end. So do you have a question? No. Left hand on the inside, I'm not pushing down. The other thing that I'm not doing is I'm not just starting in the corner. Okay, so if I start right here and I push together, and now I start to pull and move up, take the water out. Everyone stand up and look at the inside really quick. Do you see that corner that's right there? Want to avoid this. We're trying to make bowls without any bump like that. And if you start pulling right here and then move, you're just gonna keep reinforcing a bump right here. So each time you start all the way in the middle, tracing out, and then put pressure and move up. And that really helps prevent it, okay? So I'll do one while everyone's standing really quick, actually, so you can see. So a little bit of water. So my hand's all the way in the middle. I'm not pushing down, but I am reinforcing that really round shape, coming all the way up. Now I'm pushing in with my right hand and moving up. And see how that's much more round? The big difference between a bowl and a coffee mug or anything that's cylindrical is that a bowl does not have a corner on the inside. We're trying to make these as round as possible on the inside. Like you could take a balloon and put it in here and it'd be constantly turning, which is also one of the big challenges of a bowl. So I'm really close to being done with this. There's a lot of extra clay down here, but remember I need that so I can trim it away. And I'm gonna do one more pull. And now if I want the bowl to be wider, I can make it wider at the very end. But if I do that before, I'll show you what happens in a second with that. So this isn't a bad bowl. I would say that this rim is a little sharp. Does everyone see that? So that's where I would take the webbing with my fingers and really lightly touch, and I would start to round that edge over, okay? I don't know if anyone can see, it's starting to fall. So at this point, you could be done with it and you can take it off and trim it and finish it up later. But I want everyone to try using this tool at least one time on some of your bowls. And because this is flexible, what we can do is rib the inside. I'm gonna do the outside first, because if you're going to rib the outside of a bowl, you want to do it before the inside so you're not touching the outside again, okay? But you can take this, start to scrape away. One of the rules I have for my class is to not use the sponge to make things smooth, okay? The sponge doesn't make things smooth. Ribs or compression makes things smooth. So you can see that's a very different look than the throwing lines, and it's a continuous contour. There's no real flat spots. This is what the sponge looks like. I know that's very subtle, but it looks it's a very different thing. And especially if you keep doing it and sponging it. The other thing is you're adding water to it, and it's gonna wanna fall, right? So really, we only want water to avoid friction, and we don't want more water than that. So no sponge, rib or fingers. Like I very much prefer this scraped look. It'll look great with glaze on it. It'll be super round and consistent, okay? They don't have to be round. If you want to alter their shapes, that's completely fine with me. You can see when I'm doing this, I'm doing it across for myself and just spinning it off my hands. I can do something like this. It can go further. Make a kind of flower. You could make it square if you want to. All of that's okay with me. And you can also, if your hand's sitting still, right, you can add lines to it, inside or outside. And I think you should definitely try doing this on some of your pieces, okay? Play around with texture, have fun. I'm gonna see if I can show you what happens here. The more you work clay, the more you touch it, the more likely it is to fall. You can see I'm working back out that shape that I had and it seems okay. But let's say you're like, it doesn't really look like a bowl yet, it's not wide enough, bowls are wide, and you keep going and you're making this really wide and you're making it thin and you're adding more and more water. And then all of a sudden, yeah, and your wheel's spinning fast because everyone's doing this and you're like, oh no, it's gonna fall. And then, I mean, it does, it's just gonna fall eventually. And we can't really come back from this, okay? This is really tough to come back from. So that happens sometimes. That's okay. We can take this off and pretend, let's say you have one that fails. You can use this. Use this to cut it off. And we have these are called plaster bats. We'll bring them out during class. And what they're really great for is drawing your clay back out. Plaster is porous, and so it's actively absorbing the water out of the clay. So you can put your clay on here. Obviously, more surface area touching the plaster, it's going to be drawing it out faster. And you can probably wait 10 or 15 minutes or less, and that clay will be ready to wedge. It's really fast. Once this gets saturated with water, it slows down. You can only scrape this with plastic tools. If you use a metal tool and we accidentally get plaster in the clay, it will explode in the kiln. Plaster will blow up in the kiln. So plastic tools only on here. So I'm gonna go one more, and I'm gonna do it a little bit faster this time just to reiterate everything.